Thanks everybody for staying till the end of day 3, and apologies if you came to the Ditto brief earlier that we missed. There's a little bit of a miscommunication on a schedule change, but anybody that missed it, this will be recorded and can be shared out. So I'm Brian Young, product engineer with a small software company called Ditto. We started as a commercial software company and have started to transition some of the technology dual use for federal and public safety spaces. We'll go into that a little bit. Background-wise, I've been working in the TAK development ecosystem for a number of years, largely within SOCOM, and then about a year ago joined Ditto to help bring this innovative technology into the TAK ecosystem. So we'll start with a sort of a background on what is Ditto, just go through the tech stack, and then we'll get into some vignettes on how we're integrating it into TAK and how the technology can be used to provide capabilities. And then at the very end, we'll have, instead of me doing a demo, we'll have sort of a live demo if anybody wants to participate. There's an Edge Sync plugin that Ditto developed and put on tak.gov. I've seen a couple devices running around already this week. If you have an Android device, you want to put it on your phone, we can share some data at the end of this, and you can get a feel for how it works. We'll also have a few phones here that you can put hands on if you'd like. Okay, and I would like to introduce the team here. I have Mike Herman, who is the TAK product manager, and then we have Anur is one of our developers working in the TAK space. I'm going to hand it over to Mike to run through just the technology brief real quickly.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Just going to give a super quick technology brief, just kind of to give everyone a kind of background of what the art of possible is with Ditto. So Ditto was designed by two software developers by trade who worked for a company called Realm, which was later acquired by MongoDB, and this was the system they were building for MongoDB. So they developed Ditto as a way to eliminate the cloud as a single point of failure between edge devices. So they think it's really dumb that we're all walking around with supercomputers in our pocket, but if I send you sitting right next to me a text message, that message has to leave this room, this building, to go to a touch server and come back. So they recognize that the cloud is a single point of failure and that there's got to be a better way to tackle this problem. So Ditto is an SDK, and it's essentially two things. It is a mesh network combined with a database. So the database portion of Ditto allows you to read and write data onto the storage disk of the device itself, so that even when devices are disconnected, you can read and edit that data. So you think of it like a Google Doc, like a Google spreadsheet. You can just edit while it's offline. And then when they come back online, the synchronization is immediate and automatic and is able to transmit just the delta state. So remember that Google Doc, it's only transmitting that one cell that you change rather than flooding the network with all the data, that entire spreadsheet over again. And that's done through a piece of technology called CRDTs, or conflict-free replicated data types. If you want to know more about those, talk to Anur. So this is done through what we refer to as the rainbow connection, which essentially just means that Ditto can leverage any RF that's available to your device. So in the case of a modern smartphone, that's Bluetooth Low Energy, peer-to-peer Wi-Fi, or a LAN, whether that's connected to the internet or not, cellular backhaul, or in the case of why we're all here today, for TAK, a tactical radio plugged into your phone. So the mesh architecture of Ditto is broken up into what we refer to as big peers and small peers. So the big peer is just an instance of Ditto that lives in the cloud. It is not the central arbiter of all the data, but if the cloud is in the picture, then that's great. It can be used for long-term storage of data. So we like to say that the technology is cloud optional, right? So if you have a server or cloud connection, that's great, but you don't need it. You can still input data at the edge where you might not have a connection to a server, and can still multi-hop that data up to a server and be on line of sight. So commercially, as Brian mentioned, we got to start as a commercial company, used first in commercial airlines. So Delta, Alaska Airlines, Lufthansa, all customers using the Ditto SDK to build applications for baggage handling, for cabin crew collaboration, for ground crew collaboration, dozens of different applications. Our largest vertical is actually point of sale. So our biggest customer is Chick-fil-A. So have you been through a Chick-fil-A drive-through, watching a guy in the drive-through take your order with an iPad? Chick-fil-A wants to ensure that order is able to be replicated to the kitchen without having to rely on an internet connection, because of that first slide that I show you. That can go down at any time. On to what while we're all here today. So Ditto, want to emphasize that the Ditto plugin is not Ditto, right? This is an instance of Ditto. And for all the developers in here, you can go to our website and download the Ditto SDK and put that into your own plugin or your own application for free. You can just create an account on the portal and start messing around with it. But I'll turn it back over to Brian to talk about what he did with the Ditto SDK with TAK.
Thanks. So just briefly to follow up what Mike was saying there at the end, this is where you can find the plugin on tak.gov. I neglected to show it earlier, but when you pull it up, you'll see a EULA associated with the plugin, just saying that it's based on the Ditto SDK, but the plugin itself is available for download and use with versions 4.10 and newer. And there's lots of good information on the Ditto website about edge synchronization and the challenges in general. There's blog posts out here and content on here that speaks to how Ditto solves some of those challenges. But finally, as Mike mentioned, it's a cross-platform SDK that we've wrapped into an ATAK plugin. What this means is it'll run on iOS as well. It'll run on Windows, Linux. We have some work in other spaces, running it on unmanned systems to allow vehicles to communicate to each other autonomously and reliably. It'll run in a web browser. It'll run in the cloud, as Mike mentioned. So anyway, these are SDKs. They can just be downloaded from whatever package manager exists for that platform, and then it's pretty easy to get the SDK up and running. All right, so the ATAK Ditto plugin that was released to tak.gov last week is what we call our Edge Sync plugin. And if folks are familiar with the data sync experience associated with the TAK server, where you can create edge feeds and you can share content, you can subscribe and join and leave feeds, this plugin is aiming to provide a similar experience as that, but without a server requirement. So every device essentially has its own database and can communicate peer-to-peer reliably. The content will multi-hop, and it'll hop over various transports, and information is cached while you're offline. So if you're disconnected from your team and you send a chat message, as soon as that link is closed, that chat message gets delivered to your teammate. Same thing with editing a route or dropping a point or capturing a picture. One of the things that we've done with this plugin is hooked into the existing tools and workflows that folks are already familiar with in ATAK. So we didn't create a bunch of new ways to create content or interact with the user interface. So you're just using the standard ATAK chat tool or the point dropper or the route planner or the quick pick tool. When you're laying down graphics on the map, all that content is seamlessly synchronized by Ditto. So we mentioned it's up for 4.10.newer, but it's also under active development. So check back often. There's going to be lots of new features going in there. This capture here is just pulled out of the user guide that's also available on tak.gov, and it just gives a little how-to for the widgets that are on our dashboard. So this is a dashboard that informs the user of what information has been shared in Ditto, either by yourself or by your teammates, and then little indicators of new content that you've received. So I wanted to run through a few vignettes, a few different use cases for what this technology can be used for within the TAK ecosystem. And the first one is pretty straightforward. You can have 2 devices, 5 devices, really any number of devices that can share content at the edge with or without tactical radios, with or without Wi-Fi access points or internet connectivity. Built into, as Mike mentioned, built into the smartphone that you're already holding is Bluetooth Low Energy, which we can use. It's great for moving chat messages and PLI over 100 meters or so. And it also includes peer-to-peer Wi-Fi On Android, it's called Wi-Fi Aware. But if you're an iOS user, just think like AirDrop. It gives you high speed throughput, but at limited range. So you might get 60, 80 meters out of that, but a lot. You can send pictures and files. And so Ditto's not creating any RF. We're not creating any radios. We're just trying to efficiently use the radios that you already have, whether they're in your smartphone or a tactical radio. So similar to that, just a couple more specific use cases. Wildland fire, public safety space is one that comes to mind. If you have folks out in the field that don't have infrastructure, but they need to be able to see each other's location, PLI dots on the map. They need to be able to share chat messages, maybe draw boundaries for fire coverage areas. They can do that easily and reliably at the edge. Same thing, we've seen some folks in the military space that use the jump master capabilities within TAK. At the DZ, you may not have connectivity, so they can create jump master plans on the phones, share them right there at the DZ before they go up, and then while they're in the air, if they're close, if they're close enough or they have other radios, they can use Ditto to stay in sync. So places you might use it is anywhere that you don't have network infrastructure or centralized connection to your cloud servers like TAK servers, or anywhere that you don't have extra edge compute and battery power to run, say, like an edge TAK server or something like this. All right, so another use case here that has kind of come up in a few different cases is the Ditto's kind of inherent ability to use multiple transports at the same time and bridge them together. So this was an exercise that we did about a year ago and then replicated again just a couple weeks ago up in Montana. There's a technology rodeo put on in June every year by a company called Tough Stump, and several different man-A vendors come together and other technology companies come together to test their technology in austere conditions. So in this case here, we had some MPU networks running TAK, and we had a Silvus network running TAK, and there were two separate bubbles, and those two separate teams were sharing data. And then as soon as we brought Ditto into the mix, we were able to just draw up a Bluetooth. In this case, we did it just over Bluetooth Low Energy. And so now you're sharing data seamlessly across two different radios from two different vendors, different waveform, different encryptions, different channel properties, and the information just flows through. This is another sort of follow-on example to that. The top left is just a screenshot of what we call the Ditto presence viewer. So it shows you kind of who's on your mesh, what transports are in play at that moment. The colors may be a little hard to see in this picture, but up in here, the blue lines are Bluetooth Low Energy, the pink lines are peer-to-peer Wi-Fi that I described, and then these green lines out here are linked, are man-A links. So one of them is an MPU link, one of them is a Trellisware link, one of them is a Silvus link. We also had Domo Tactical. So we're able to kind of bridge all those into one Ditto mesh. Similarly, in the bottom right, we had a network when we were doing some testing with some of our beta testers. We had Harris 163 radios that were connected via Ditto to an MPU network, and one of those MPUs had Cloud Relay beyond line of sight. So we had another user, several states away, that was able to seamlessly share information over Ditto with 163 users in another state. This is a scale test that we did. This is an eye chart with all the lines, but we did a test with 100 to 150 radios and just kind of tried to see how far we could bring the system up. So we were able to build this mesh. About 25 of those were tactical radios and EUDs, and then the others were just EUDs. So you could think it's part of the force, you're just holding a phone with no cables, no tethers, but they're still able to communicate with the folks over the tactical link. All right, so another area that we've started working on is interoperability. Mike mentioned the big peer, and it's sort of Ditto's cloud native component, but we've done some initial work with TAK server interoperability. So we can essentially take an edge Ditto mesh, and if one of those devices has an up and out to the TAK server, all of the data at the edge can flow through. So you no longer need n number of connections beyond line of sight or through your VPN or however you're getting back to your services. You can have one device connected. And then the other one, we did some testing on some distance over man-A. We were at 45 kilometers just testing trying to get a feel for if distance and latency had a problem, but Ditto synchronized pretty well. That bottom right, actually both of those are that same Montana rodeo that I mentioned. This is kind of a follow-on. I just mentioned some of that. All right, so another one that comes up a lot as folks are getting familiar with Ditto and starting to play with it, and they come back to basically the ability to automatically use transports, whatever transports are available. So Ditto has, the Ditto SDK has algorithms to intelligently and optimally build a mesh. So we don't try to connect every single EUD or every single component on the network to everything else. We don't need that many connections, but we try to keep everybody well connected so there are no islands where people are without data. And so we do that by using the most efficient links that are available. So if you do have a tactical data radio that has high throughput and further reach, then we'll use that. If that link goes down because you had some terrain in the way or you had to swap a battery, it'll automatically fall back to other transports that are available. Again, that might be peer-to-peer Wi-Fi, that might be Bluetooth, that might be a different tactical radio you have. So it'll kind of just fall back onto whatever transports are available. And then in the event you're completely disconnected, the system will store the data offline, and as soon as you reconnect, it'll automatically synchronize, sending only the things that have changed, as Mike mentioned. So we're sending just the diffs across the network. And again, Ditto supports Bluetooth Low Energy cross-platform. So now you can use Bluetooth to communicate between an Android device, an iOS device, and a Raspberry Pi or whatever other type of compute you have. And again, we can't like defy physics. There's only so much data you can push through something like Bluetooth Low Energy, but for certain types of data sets, it's a great option. Ditto's also encrypting all data. No matter what transport we're using, we're encrypting all the data using AS256 before we go out to transport. So if you have a tactical data radio or something else that's encrypting, then you end up with dual layer. But even if we're going over Bluetooth, we use the same encryption. All right, so another one is a sort of a partner force link up. It's super easy to configure and just start using Ditto. If you grab the plugin from tak.gov and download it, you can just tap the button to log into the community group, and any devices that are nearby are going to start sharing information. So you don't have to provision devices or plug them in to get them on the network. With this beta plugin, we're using QR codes to segment and provide privacy from different groups. So it's very easy just to scan a QR code with somebody that you've linked up with. So if anybody does have the Ditto plugin, we're going to fire up some devices. This is a hike we did. While we were out here this week, we were able to get out and enjoy the beautiful country. So we did a little hike, and as we were hiking, we were sharing data and storing data in Ditto. And so let me jump down one screen here. So this is the first screen that you'll see when you first bring up the Ditto EdgeSync plugin. The community group on the left it just works. You download it from tak.gov and you tap that button, and you'll begin sharing information. So I have a device up here, and there's some devices here that are being brought online. Looks like there's more devices in my mesh than we have, so at least a couple of you guys are running Ditto, and those of you that are should just be receiving all the routes and the pictures and the information that we collected while we were doing that hike. And when we wrap up here, there's a handful of devices up here. If you don't have an ATAK and you want to just come get a feel for it and see how it works, you can come up here and grab it. So these are sort of a list of questions that we get commonly. But as we're getting towards the end of the day and we've already been going for 20 minutes, I want to make sure that we have time for any questions that you guys in the audience have. So is there any questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have any way to prioritize the data to go across if your bandwidth is low?
Yeah, so there's a concept of subscriptions built into Ditto that kind of underpins how data moves across the network. Sorry, to repeat the question, is there a way to prioritize information to preserve bandwidth? So how data is shared across the network. So we use subscriptions to express interest in certain types of data. So in a simple case, you and I might be interested in red cars, and they might be interested in blue cars, so we don't need to send them the red cars. So we have that sort of baked in at the SDK level. And then in the application, you can sort of build on top of that to determine how you want to move information based on your network conditions and what peers are available online. One example of that we did early on in this was to not send full resolution images when we use the ATAK Quick Pick tool, and we capture these Android devices will capture 3, 5, 10 megabyte files. So we'll thumbnail that and send that thumbnail over the network automatically, and then allow the user to elect if they want to download the full resolution content. And the quality of service is a future improvement area for Ditto as well, to give a little more control at the API level. Yes, sir.
Kind of in the same vein, are you able to prioritize the RF bearers or potentially blacklist them? Like if I don't want any of my devices using BLE, can I log that down?
Yes, yeah. The question is, can we prioritize or limit choose which transports are used? So by default, in this particular plugin, it's going to use anything that's available, and then you go into the settings of the plugin, the ATAK user interface, and you just uncheck the box for Bluetooth Low Energy. All that is doing is it's basically configuring how Ditto is going to operate. So if there's a use case where you just never want to make Bluetooth available, then you just disable that completely. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What is the minimum bandwidth you need to make the system work? Will it work on a VHF data radio at 4 kilobits?
Yeah. The question is minimum bandwidth, and would it work on HF type radios? So in the current implementation here, we use TCP/IP for Bluetooth. Is a little bit of a different case, so it kind of depends on the transport. But in most cases, we're using just standard TCP/IP protocols. So we use multicast to discover peers and populate the presence graph that I showed you, and then we use TCP to actually replicate the data. We're working now to do that over UDP Quick, which TAK supports natively as well. And then a future improvement is to do that over multicast. So we're continuing to optimize. So the first gate would be, does the radio allow a TCP connection and or a multicast connection? And once those are solved, it really comes down to the application. There's a pretty low overhead amount of information that we have to maintain presence that allows us to create the connections and maintain good balance across the mesh. That's really low overhead. So depends on how you're using the system. I'd love to get a hold of some of the equipment and do some testing with you, or put this in your hands and let you test it and give us some feedback. But I would think PLI and points on the map shouldn't be a problem in that type of environment, but pictures or large files, you may struggle. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir.
How does the mesh handle having more than one device connected to a TAK server?
Okay, good question. How does the mesh handle more than one device connected to a TAK server? So the TAK server interoperability, I hope I didn't oversell it. I kind of, it's ongoing work. It's functional, but it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. So currently, the way that works is you elect which device is going to connect to the TAK server. So you take your EUDs and you go in and you flip the switch. And you can do that with a couple of devices if you want, but you flip the switch on which device is going to be your up and out. Moving forward, some opportunity to automate that or elect one to fill that role. Another angle that we're evaluating based on feedback from beta testers is to actually push that logic into the TAK server rather than the EUD. So that cross-platform SDK that we mentioned, we can take that and embed that in a TAK server plugin, and then any device that has the up and out will just automatically sync. That might be a better long-term solution. Yep.
Is
Yeah, so is there extra overhead if multiple or all devices at the edge are bridging up to the TAK server? I think in that case, you probably are duplicating data, because if you have a TAK server connection, ATAK is if all your devices are connected to TAK server, they're all pushing data to TAK server the way they normally do without Ditto in the picture. So now we're moving a lot of the same data twice. So I think there probably would be some overhead if you just had everybody bridging. Yeah.
Impact on power consumption?
Yeah, so the question was, what is the impact on power consumption? I don't have a quantifiable number that I can give you. I think there's maybe an opportunity to do some studies on that, but I don't think it's going to dominate your ATAK, your EUD. If you're already running ATAK, you're already doing network things, you already have the GPS flipped on, you already have your screen running. That screen just being on is going to be consume way more than, probably any of your plugins or all of your plugins. And the other thing I'll mention is that this the technology to do all the networking and database operation is the same technology that's running in the apps that Delta Airlines and Chick-fil-A are building. So we have pretty high bar for performance and scalability. And so any innovation that continues to happen there just automatically gets pulled into future versions of this. Yeah.
How does this plugin kind of interact with the existing data sync function? Like, if you were to suddenly do a data sync, but you're out of reach of the TAK server, then you come back into range, will it still do the data sync, or will it go through?
Good question. So how does this plugin interact with the existing data sync implementation that leverages TAK server? So today you can use the two in parallel. And if you want to share data from Ditto into a data sync feed, you just manually do that. You just touch on the screen and do that, and vice versa. I mentioned some rapid development iterations coming up. One of the things that Anya and I are actively working on is what we're calling edge feeds, which will allow us to take what we've built here, where currently you scan a QR code and you're sharing information with everybody that scans the same QR code. So we can layer on top of that and create buckets of data that are edge feeds that you can create and subscribe to and share information without getting too much clutter. So we could have one for room C, room B, and room A here at this conference, and we're all sharing information, but you can only see what you want to see. So once we've proven that implementation out, there's pretty much a one-to-one correlation between one of those edge feeds and a TAK server feed. So you could automate keeping those two in sync, and that's probably the route we'll go with that. But another angle that has come up is there's lots of other plugins out there that have been developed that leverage the same APIs as data sync, and they use the same protocols, and a lot of those would benefit from an edge sync capability. So there may be an opportunity to have a tighter integration with data sync, where when the server is available, let's use it, and when not, let's do edge sync. Yeah, good question. Yes, sir.
How do you acquire a QR code?
Good question. So again, on this screen, it comes with sort of a baked-in community group that just anybody can use, and it just works. We're in beta testing, so if you want some private QR codes, I'll show a contact slide, or you can reach out to us. And the way it works today is we'll just send them to you, and then moving forward, there'll be an enterprise license version of this that provides additional future capabilities and the ability to manage your own identities and some license tooling and future integrations that are yet to come. So yeah, and I'll just go ahead and flip to that. That's where you get the plugin. We're in TAK Mattermost. So you can find us in the chat. Is an email. The website is there, and we'll stick around. I know we're at the end of the day here, but we'll stick around if you have questions or you want to get a contact card. Please do. And there's a few phones here as well. If on your way out you want to come and play around with it, feel free to. Any final questions? I think we're at time. And I don't see any questions online. So thank you everybody for sticking around to the end of the day.